Good day and a very warm welcome to your weekly and current affairs program, Global Report, a program that focuses on trending regional and international news. I am Jerome Peresu. Today we cast a spotlight on Mozambique, who recently signed a peace accord with Renamo on Wednesday. But first, we take a look at the stories making headlines.
Malaria has killed more than 1,800 people in Burundi this year, according to the United Nations Humanitarian Agency. In its latest situation report, the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, said 5.7 million cases of malaria has been recorded in Burundi in 2019, a figure roughly equal to half its entire population. Of those cases, a total of 1,801 died from the mosquito-borne disease in Burundi between January 1 and July 21, OCHA said. The tiny country of 11 million people in the African Great Lakes region has still not declared a national emergency, despite OCHA saying the outbreak crossed epidemic proportions in May. A lack of preventative measures such as mosquito nets, climate changes, and increased movements of people from mountain areas with low immunity to malaria were driving the crisis. The country declared a malaria epidemic in March 2017 when it had recorded 1.8 million cases and 700 deaths, but was resisting doing the same now. Demonstrators have gathered at Hong Kong's airport, marking the start of 3 days of unauthorized rallies in the Chinese territory. Activists dressed in black sat in the arrivals hall, waving banners to raise awareness among international visitors. Protests have gripped Hong Kong for weeks, beginning with anger at an extradition bill and morphing into demands for greater freedoms. The former British colony is part of China but enjoys more autonomy. It has a free press and a judicial independence under the one country, two systems approach. Freedom activists' fears are being increasingly eroded. They have called for an independent inquiry into alleged police brutality during the protests, the complete withdrawal of the controversial extradition bill, and the resignation of Hong Kong's leader, Carrie Lam. At a press conference on Friday, Ms. Lam spoke on the economic impact of the protests after meeting with business leaders. She called on people to stop taking part in protests and for an end to the violence. Demonstrators plan to stay at the airport throughout the weekend. U.S. immigration officials say they have temporarily released about 300 people who were arrested in a massive raid in Mississippi on Wednesday. Democrats and rights groups have condemned the arrests as cruel. Nearly 700 workers from 7 agricultural processing plants were arrested for allegedly not having proper documentation to be in the U.S. Officials say they took steps to ensure any children were properly cared for. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, said approximately 680 removable aliens had been detained during the operation, which saw agents arriving in buses to question and arrest workers at the plants. President Donald Trump had announced an immigration crackdown in June, saying millions of illegal aliens who had found their way into the U.S. would be removed. ICE spokesperson Brian Cox told the media of the 680 people arrested in Wednesday's raids, more than 300 had been released with notices to appear before immigration judges.
Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. You are watching your favorite program, Global Report. Now, joining me in the studio today is Rodney Ruwende, a public policy and development analyst who will help us unpack and tell us a bit more about the accord, the bilateral peace accord that was signed on Wednesday.
Mozambique's president and the leader of the former rebel group, Renamo, have signed a landmark peace deal in Maputo, ending a 2-year conflict that has rekindled memories of a brutal civil war. President Armando Guebuza and Alfonso Dhlakama, who came out of hiding on Thursday, signed the deal on Friday in front of about 100 diplomats and dignitaries. The two leaders embraced, prompting jubilant cries and clapping from those gathered. For 2 years, government forces and fighters loyal to Dhlakama have clashed with the rebel leader, accusing the state of reneging on a peace deal that ended Mozambique's brutal civil war. Around 1 million died as a result of the 15-year conflict, which ended in 1992. In the recent clashes, Dhlakama's supporters attacked buses and cars on the country's main north-south highway, while government forces raided his bush hideout. The party is expected to handily win upcoming elections in October. There were fears that the polls could be marred by violence. Dhlakama has lost every presidential election since 1994, and Renamo is struggling to retain its status as the biggest opposition party. The peace deal will see Renamo fighters integrated into the military and the party given a greater say in election oversight bodies.
Welcome to the program, Rodney.
Thank you very much, Jerome, for having me.
It's a pleasure. Now, Rodney, I will run through the trends or some of the things that happened in Mozambique. Mozambique was one of the world's poorest countries. Socialist policies, economic mismanagement, and a brutal civil war from 1977 to 1992 further impoverished the country, and in 1987 the government embarked on a series of macroeconomic reforms. Now, with that in mind, the peace accord between the government and Renamo and the ongoing pending issues, how important is this treaty for the country of Mozambique?
Well, I think the importance goes even beyond Mozambique itself. This country has been at war since 2004, and it means that this time around, for the Mozambicans first, they're able to live in peace. You know what peace does, in the fact that you are able to wake up in the morning without any fear that you might be shot dead and die in the crossfire. Now, the second important thing about living in peace is that the government is able to institute development projects in the affected areas, especially in central Mozambique, the Gorongosa area, where the civil war was intense. So there have been a lack of development in that particular part of the country for the past 15 years. Now, turning to the whole country at large, because when there is a conflict, it means that the government is expending resources on fighting the rebels and not concentrating on giving people proper services. So this is a chance for Mozambique to rebuild itself. It's a chance for Mozambique to re-engage with other development partners so that they are able to fight that tag that you gave there when you say that it's one of the poorest countries on the globe, which is quite sad because Mozambique is endowed with quite a number of resources.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it has got quite a lot of coal, which I'm sure as Zimbabwe would be happy to see them exploiting that coal so that they are able to generate electricity. So this is a new start for Mozambique, and I think for the whole Southern Africa region as a whole, and it is critical that this is also coming just before elections are held. So it means that they will be able to campaign freely across the whole country, and the candidates will be able to give the people of Mozambique their promise, their electoral manifestos and promises for what they'll be able to do for them after the elections of 19 October. So this is a very, very important occasion for Mozambique and for the whole of Southern Africa.
Indeed, we embrace that, but as comforting as those words sound, Rodney, they agree that the governor is to be elected from a winning province. I'm going to go deeper into the issues at hand in the agreement, and that Renamo would get representation from in the election, so to speak. Now, the electoral body. And now, how sure is it that Renamo will completely show true cause to their commitment to disarm?
Well, I think this is one of the issues that drove Renamo back to war in the first place in in 2004 rather, the issue of poor representation in government. So if you look at the trend of elections since the peace accord had been signed in 1992, in the elections in 1994, Frelimo had a majority. But if you look at the performance of Renamo, say in the elections in 1999, they gathered about 47% of the vote in the elections and 117 seats in the parliament. But after that, it was a downward spiral, and with the 2004 elections, there was a lot of rigging allegations that were laid on the winning candidate, who was Armando Gebuza then, and then that drove Alfonso Dhlakama the late to then go back to Gorongosa and start his insurgents. I think the bigger problem being that when the Rome Accord was signed in 1992, the Renamo, while forming a political party which was to contest elections, did not disarm its 5,000 fighters. Instead, they remained camped at Gorongosa throughout that whole period from 1992 to the start of the insurrection again. So you find that this, of course, is a very important question, and I think it will only be addressed after the elections on the 19th of October, because the issue was about representation. And I think the idea that you mentioned, that the governors for the provinces will be elected directly by the people, also gives a litmus test, because it doesn't necessarily mean that Renamo will win, say, the central province where it is popular. It just means that there is an opportunity that they will be able to direct the policies in that particular province if they win, because the current situation where the president resident in Maputo appoints governors is one of the major bone of contentions which led to the resurrection of the hostilities between the government and Renamo. And I think the guarantee that Renamo will not go back and start the war is in the conduct of the elections, because the issue was about the holding of free and fair elections, which Renamo felt they were cheated, especially with the 2004 election.
Rodney, can you agree that this is also the first time that this is actually happening in Mozambique, in the Republic of Mozambique? The governor being elected? Yeah,
this is the first time, because they've had to make those changes to the constitution and thereby make sure that the people vote directly for whoever they want to lead them. I know with democracy there are various systems. Some people would feel that because the president is elected by everyone in the country directly, like here in Zimbabwe, it means that whoever they put to manage a province is just a representative of the president. But this time what they are actually doing is say that it's the people who should decide who should live them in that particular province. This is because one of the key concerns by Renamo was that the provinces where they had a majority, but in terms of the head of police in that particular province, who is the government, it had to be someone from Frelimo who would be nominated by the president of the ruling party.
Now let's take a look at our economic ties, the benefits for Mozambique, having gone into such an agreement. What are some of the benefits? What are some of the benefits?
Well, for Zimbabwe, really, you know, our economy as a landlocked country, we need somewhere where we can access the seas so that we're able to engage in world trade. So just a few weeks ago, the president, Comrade Emerson Mnangagwa, was officially opening the Zimbabwean dry port in Namibia, which is very far away from this country. But if we are able to engage with Mozambique, they were in the process of expanding the airports. I know Beira has been expanded. So it means that bigger ships are able to dock there, and they're able to bring even bigger goods, and it means the port will be much busier, and it gives us that access to the Indian Ocean, because goods coming from the Indian Ocean, China, are easy to dock there than for them to go through Walvis Bay, which is a bit further. And looking at our ties, like I mentioned earlier on, the issue of coal that Mozambique has in abundance, we're able to leverage if we can get them generating more power from the areas that they'll be mining coal will be able to access electricity. We also have the issue of the Cabora Bassa Dam. If the government in Mozambique is not preoccupied with war, then it's easy for us as a neighbor to Mozambique to be able to sit down with them and improve our trade relations.
Rodney, on that issue of economic relations with the neighboring countries, and how important it is for Zimbabwe to be very strategic in that fact. Our quote, reports from Zimbabwe's eastern neighbor, quote that the country's Minister of Trade and Commerce, Regendra de Souza, as having told the President Mnangagwa that the ban could be met with retaliatory measures from President Filipe Nyusi's government. There were contentions there the one time. How does that affect us if we are not at the same level in terms of the relations, the good relations?
Well, like I said, we are a landlocked country, so the first and important thing is that we really need Mozambique, because if you look at our fuel, the most of it really comes through the pipeline from Mabeira and pumped up to Mavukuye in Harare. So we really need to be on good terms with Mozambique. And remember that in the earlier conflict, which ended in 1992, Zimbabwe was an active participant in the war, because we had to safeguard this pipeline, which is a lifeline for Zimbabwe in terms of accessing fuel. So it is very important that we have Mozambique at peace. We have Mozambique that is able to develop, so that we can be able to have good roads in Mozambique, so that we can go and send trucks to go and pick up goods, and have the railway line functioning very well without any threat that some insurgent will go and bomb the line, and all the trade will just suffer because of the civil conflict that will be there.
Correct. It is important to have those relations with Mozambique all sorted out and in good working condition. That is Rodney Ruwende giving us an insight of the peace agreement that was signed on Wednesday. But we're going to take a short break, but do join us after for more. Welcome back to Global Report, a program that focuses on trending regional and international news. And we have invited into the studio Rodney, and to help us unpack some of those issues on the peace accord that was signed between the government and Renamo. Now, Rodney, just before the break, we were talking about the relations, how important it is for Zimbabwe to have good relations with Mozambique. Now, the presence of South Africa in Zimbabwe, what can we say about that? How significant is that in the whole procedure of that peace accord?
Well, you realize that Zimbabwe and South Africa are very key in the issue to do with Renamo, because Renamo itself was a creation of the Rhodesian government in 1975, following the attainment of independence by Mozambique. So the Rhodesians felt that they had been flanked, and Mozambique being independent, of course, they had the pipeline that they wanted, and Samora Machel coming in as a socialist government, the Rhodesians had their fears that that will be sucked out of them, the pipeline would be closed, and then their access to the sea would be curtailed. And so they came up with the idea of Renamo, which augured well with the then racist apartheid regime in South Africa, which also did not want to be surrounded by a communist state in the mold of Mozambique. And so they sought to destabilize the government by their assistance to Renamo that they gave to Dhlakama through arming him and making sure that, Mozambique had given Zimbabwe the Zanla forces bases in Mozambique, and Rhodesia then felt that it couldn't properly patrol its 800-kilometer border that we share with Mozambique, and the better way of doing that was to arm Renamo. So you find that Zimbabwe, South Africa are really tied to the conflict in Mozambique, and in 1992 Zimbabwe was also in Rome to sign the peace agreement. And like I said, for Zimbabwe now, it's the issue to do with access to the sea, and obviously a free Mozambique also produces markets for Zimbabwe for its industries to expand. And South Africa, on the other hand, is Mozambique's largest trading partner, and it's very, very close to the Share border, and the capital Maputo is very close to South Africa. So these countries are really, really tied to Mozambique economically, and even socially. You find that you've got a lot of Shona-speaking people in Mozambique, also here in Zimbabwe. You've got a lot of Shangaan people who are in Mozambique, and they're also in South Africa. So those ties are very deep between these three countries.
Now, just moving on, still on the same matter, the relations between the AU and Mozambique?
Well, I think
in terms of their heads up?
Yeah, I think for the African Union, well, it's really a plus because it's one less conflict to solve. Because one of the key issues for the African Union is to make sure that there is peace in Africa, so that the dream real of having a united Africa it becomes a reality. Now, that cannot happen if we've got such kind of civil conflict ongoing. And then recently we had the signing of the African Free Continental Trade Area, the AfriCAFTA. So this presents an opportunity really for the other African countries to be able to freely trade with Mozambique, and they're able to go and even start businesses in Mozambique, because no one, except if you're selling arms, would you want to go and invest in a country where there is war. But most businesses would shun a place where there is war, because a lot of your logistics, your trucks, your goods might be hijacked by insurgents. So it creates an opportunity to expand that vast market that is offered by the Africa Continental Free Trade Area.
Now, the peace accord seems to be in line with peace, upcoming elections in Mozambique, the integration, and the upcoming SADC summit. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think the signing of the peace agreement comes at quite an opportune time for Mozambique and for the SADC region. I think for Mozambique, it means that these elections should mark a turning point. These elections should make sure that those previous allegations that we had of rigging and by the Frelimo government should really go away. We should have the elections conducted in a manner that even the losing parties don't resort to violence to try and force the government to negotiations. And already I think there's a goodwill. About 800 Renamo fighters have been camped at a demobilization camp that have been set up at Gorongosa. So that is a good sign. And for the African region, the forthcoming SADC summit and Zimbabwe taking over the chairmanship of the organ on politics and defense, this is very, very key, because it's one less headache for the incoming chair, President Mnangagwa, to deal with the issue of Mozambique, to make sure that there is peace in the whole of Southern Africa. So I think the peace accord is coming at the right time, and what is left is for elections to be conducted, and hopefully the people will make their choice, and whoever wins, it is critical that the elections are credible, so that whoever wins is able to take up the task of rebuilding Mozambique.
Rodney, what lessons can we learn from what has taken place in Mozambique as a nation, as Zimbabwe?
Well, I think the key lesson is that peace is very, very important, and we should value peace, because for the Mozambican people, they have known very little periods of peace because of this intervention by foreign forces in their politics. So it is very important that as Zimbabweans we value the peace that we have, and really shun foreign forces who want to meddle in the internal politics of another country, because the Mozambicans have solved this issue themselves, and they have come to the table. They have pledged that they will abide by the peace accord, and they are going to the elections to give the people a choice of whom they want to lead them. And I think this is very, very important for us to emulate as Zimbabweans.
And your take, your summations?
I think the end of the insurrection in Mozambique presents SADC with a chance to develop economically. You realize that it is not only Zimbabwe that can make use of the ports in Mozambique. Mozambique has got over 2,400 kilometers of coastline that can be utilized to build ports. And Mozambique is also in the process of developing LPG gas field to the tune of 24 billion, and and with an opportunity to produce power for probably the whole of Southern Africa. So I think this is a turning point, and it is very important that as a country we also support the peace efforts to make sure that Mozambique is able to participate fully as a sovereign state and a developmental state that will also assist us in our economic revival.
Rodney, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for unraveling those issues to us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. Now that was Global Report, your weekly current affairs program. Stay tuned for next week. We'll be back to see you. Bye.